Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Pyrenees Shire Council. Councillors will today deliberate and decide on a range of matters relevant to the work of council in its communities for the welfare of the people of the Pyrenees Shire. As the meeting chair, I give my consent for this ordinary meeting to be streamed live, recorded and published online. Anyone who is invited to read out a question or make a submission will be recorded, and their voice, image and comments will form part of that live stream and recording. The chair and or the CEO have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed appropriate. That may include where the content of a debate is considered misleading, defamatory or potentially inappropriate to be published. The live stream will stop prior to the closed section of the meeting and will recommence for the conclusion of the meeting. The public is able to view this live stream via our website at www.pyrenees.vic.gov.au. Should technical issues prevent the continuation of the live stream, the meeting will continue as long as a quorum can be maintained, and, where possible, a recording of the meeting will be published on Council's website. Where a quorum cannot be maintained, the meeting will be adjourned until the issue is resolved or the meeting postponed to another time and date in accordance with the Council's governance rules. We acknowledge the people past and present of the Wadawurrung, Jar Jar Wurrung, Eastern Maar and Watchabalek tribes whose land forms the Pyrenees Shire. We pay our respect to the customs, traditions and stewardship of the land by the elders and people of these tribes on whose land we meet today. We have no apologies. Is there any notice of disclosure of interest by councillors or officers? If not, I'd call for a motion confirming the previous minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on the 21st of May and closed meeting of council held on the 21st of May, as previously circulated to councillors. Moved Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Ferrari. All in favour? That is carried. There was any business arising, councillors? No business arising. Items taken on notice from the previous meeting held on the 21st. Public participation. Members of the community are encouraged to participate in public ordinary council meetings by asking questions or presenting a submission. This can be done by attending in person or by submitting in writing prior to 12 noon on the day of the meeting, online through council's website or by mail or hand delivered. If a question or submission is submitted in writing, this will be read by the chair during public participation, stating the person's name and township. Question time will be held first, followed by public submissions. 30 minutes is allowed for the total period of public participation. Time extensions may be allowed at the discretion of the chair, subject to the provisions of the governance rules. The person may ask a maximum of 2 questions at any one meeting. The chair will allocate a maximum of 5 minutes to each person who wishes to address council or ask questions. The chair, councillor or council officer to whom a question is referred may immediately answer the question or take the question on notice for answering at a later date. There will be no discussion or debate with public attendees. However, councillors may ask questions of the attendee for clarification. As we have 2 gentlemen in the gallery tonight, any questions from either party? No? Mr. Kirstenov, yes, if you wouldn't mind.
George Kirstenov, local citizen. I understand the Shire would be flat out with the fire recovery program work. However, before all that, the progress with the linear track, the linear park from the reserve lake area right through, as I understand it, almost to where we are meeting tonight. In association with that, I can also recall there was some excitement when we heard in the media that there had been provision made by the authorities for a pedestrian crossing behind us at this particular railway crossing, the Lexton Road. What I'm asking is, given all that, is the linear completion of the linear track still on schedule or planned to be forwarded when we need to? And also the pedestrian crossing facility at the Lexton Road railway line behind us here, is that also still in the council's to-do list? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Mr. CEO, I'll ask if you wish to respond.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's a pleasure to respond to Mr. Kirsanoff's question. In the first instance, the linear project is still a work in progress. A lot of that community engagement and draft work of the plan has been completed, but there are some elements that remain still to be finalised, and they relate to communications and input from the Catchment Management Authority particularly, and also in relation to land tenure. So the work is not quite completed, but it's getting very close, and it's been really well received in the community, and we look forward to bringing that report back to the community in the near future.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Mr. Gowan, do you wish to also comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Kirsanoff. I was just going to make some reference to the second part of the question about the pedestrian crossing. Council have been advocating to the authorities for that particular pedestrian crossing for a while now. We have met with representatives of Department of Transport and Planning on a number of occasions, and VicTrack. We've put forward that there is a safety issue with that crossing for pedestrians as it currently stands. There are some hurdles that we seem to be running into in terms of getting support for additional pedestrian crossings on the line. The state government has a policy that it's not looking to undertake new crossings. However, that doesn't mean we're stopping our advocacy for new crossings. So I would recommend that if you ever get the chance to write to your local member or have any discussions with those authorities, that's worth bringing the matter to their attention, and we'll continue to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. No further questions from the audience? Thank you very much for that, Mr. Kirsanoff. We'll move on to items for noting. Item 9.1, councillors. Somebody prepared to move that be accepted? Moved Councillor Eason, seconded Councillor Clark. Any questions, Councillor Eason?
Mr. Bramwell, the information that we're providing in this report is just growing and growing and growing, which is really, really good. The one thing that I did notice whilst going through it doesn't seem to be a category of any compliments that council may have received via email or phone or whatever. So are we assuming we don't get any, or we don't track them?
Thank you, Councillor Eason. We do get them, not as many as we'd like, but we do get them, but we don't track them. So we just tend to pass them on to the people about who they were referencing and then file them. But if you would like us to track them, we can.
I think it would be nice.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that on board.
Thank you, Councillor. No further questions. I put the motion. Those in favour? Is carried. Thank you. Item 9.1.2, Pyrenees Shire Ward Boundary Review. Somebody prepared. Thank you, Councillor Keogh's moved, second Councillor Eason. Any questions or comments, councillors? I did happen to notice that the Cameron's grown quite remarkably to almost, I might nearly rival Mount Emu Ward now, I think, as being the largest ward in the council. I'll put that motion, councillors. Those in favour? It's carried. Item 10.1, councillor activity reports. Moved Councillor Ferrari, seconded Councillor Keogh. No further comments, councillors. I put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Item 11.1, assembly of councillors. Moved Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Houston. No comments. All in favour? That is carried. Item 12.1, items for decision, economic development and tourism. I'll hand over to the CEO. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a pleasure to present this report to Council tonight. The purpose of the report is to present Council with the Tourism Mid-West Victoria Sustainable Destination Management Plan for its in-principle support, and for Council to provide its in-principle endorsement for the Pyrenees Local Area Action Plan, and with it then to be placed on public display for final feedback by industry stakeholders and the local community. Now, this Sustainable Destination Management Plan is a product of Tourism Mid-West Victoria. It's a significant piece of work because it becomes the action plan that guides activity from a regional tourism perspective for the next 9 years. So it's a major piece of work. It was funded without any contributions necessary from Council, because they were funds that were retained from the previous Regional Tourism Board. And of course, as you know, we now have a tourism partnership, of which Pyrenees, Moorabool, the City of Ballarat, as well as Golden Plains and Hepburn Shires are party to that partnership. And so it's a collective, along with industry representatives on that group, that looks to grow the economy through tourism into the future. It's a really exciting piece of work. It provides a vision for the future, certainly places our region, Mid-West Victoria, as a destination for tourism into the future. The second piece of work is the Local Area Action Plan. So this is a plan that's specific to Pyrenees. Again, it did not require any funds from Pyrenees Shire Council. And this plan, which is in draft at the moment, and the view is to place the final draft on exhibition for further industry participation. It sets out a vision for tourism for our council for the next 9 years. Now, this plan will replace the previous tourism strategy that Council endorsed in 2016. So it will provide a long-term vision to demonstrate to the visitors that are interested in coming to the Pyrenees Shire and investing in the Pyrenees Shire that we are, in fact, a destination for tourism as well. In particular, some of the key elements of the local area plan relate to building the brand associated with Pyrenees, developing cycle experiences to capitalise on the opportunity for cycle tourism, developing the Beaufort Lake Caravan Park to support accommodation for visitors. It certainly highlights the need and the importance of accommodation within the Pyrenees into the future as a major activity to grow the local economy. Obviously, visitors to the region will spend a lot more if they stay an extra night within the Shire. And so building the opportunity for accommodation is one of the important actions within the plan. And of course, tonight, Council will be considering a planning application for one such visitor accommodation investment. It also talks about improving cellar door experiences for wine tourism, as well as enhancements to some of the infrastructure that support tourism, including like our streetscapes. The Destination Management Plan, the primary regional document, has now been endorsed by the board last week, and a media release by the by the Tourism Midwest Victoria was released late last week. And as I say, placing the local area plan on exhibition will enable opportunity for those stakeholders to have some buy-in. It has been prepared after a significant period of consultation with the sector, and council laws as well have had presentations from the consultants engaged to prepare both of those documents. As far as council's budget towards tourism, of course, we already invest in tourism and business development through the employment of a tourism officer. We also provide visitor information through our visitor information centres, and we market through our own digital technology. And apart from that, being a partner to the Tourism Midwest Victoria partnership, council contributes $40,000, which includes a $30,000 membership contribution and a $10,000 contribution towards collaborative buy-in opportunities. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to recommend that council provides its in-principle support for the Tourism Midwest Victoria Sustainable Destination Management Plan, which, as I say, has already been adopted by the board. And secondly, provides its in-principle endorsement of the local area action plan and places that document on public display for a period of 4 weeks to allow final comment by tourism industry stakeholders and the local community. And thirdly, for council to receive a further report on the Pyrenees local area plan upon completion or conclusion of the period of public display.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Somebody prepared to move the recommendation? Councillor Beeson, seconded Councillor Ferrari. Any comments, councillors? The only comment that I would like to make is to congratulate one of our local business operators in Tim Chandler, who has been appointed to the Board of Tourism West Victoria. So well done, Tim. I'll put the motion. Those in favour is carried. Thank you. Item 12.2, Asset and Development Services, revision to the Register of Public Roads. Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is for council to consider adoption of the revision to the Register of Public Roads. Council is required to maintain a Register of Public Roads in accordance with the Road Management Act. And council officers have recently undertaken the periodic review of the network of roads within the municipality. And the review has identified that in addition to newly adopted roads, several corrections and amendments to the register are required. The revision, the revised Register of Public Roads is provided as an attachment to this report and includes some following additions and deletions. There was an addition of an unnamed road in Navarre, which was adopted by council on the 20th of February this year. And there were some deletions of forestry tracks, which are not considered to be the responsibility of council, and they include Baxter Track, Forts Road, Somerville Road and Tower Road. The Register of Public Roads is an essential document in relation to the management of risk associated with the management and maintenance of public roads. And the revision to council's Register of Public Roads is provided for consideration and adoption by council. And therefore, it's the officer recommendation that council endorses the revised road hierarchy as detailed in this report and adopts the revised Register of Public Roads.
Thank you. You heard the recommendation, councillors. Move Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Keogh. Any comments, councillors? Councillor Clark?
Just quickly to compliment the officers, it's well worth reading if you're not sure, if you want to find a different name. There's 20 pages of about 9-point type in terms of the number of roads and the roads that we've got. So it's a significant document, but very important in terms of our funding, and we've got all our roads registered. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comments. I put the recommendation. Those in favour, that is carried. Item 12.2.2, proposal for the use and development of land for group accommodation and associated works in the business identification sign at 76 Coin Hill Road, Warburton. Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do not propose to read the whole report, but I will summarise the report for the benefit of councillors and the gallery. Purpose of this report is to consider planning permit PA 22091 for land at 76 Coin Hill Road, Walborough. The application process proposes to use and develop the land for group accommodation, associated works, and a business identification sign. The application was advertised and council received one objection. In accordance with section 55 of the Planning Environment Act, the application was referred to Acciona as manager of the adjacent Walborough wind farm. The council received a referral response which included objections and concerns with the proposal. Following consultation with the objector, appropriate permit conditions have been developed to address concerns and objections raised. The application has been assessed against relevant provisions of the Pyrenees planning scheme. The report details the site context and what is proposed. The application proposes to use the land for group accommodation, and the application proposes the development of 8 self-contained accommodation eco-pods. These comprise 3 single-bedroom pods and 5 studio pods, and the details of those are in the report. And there's also a single car parking space is proposed for each pod. No vegetation is proposed to be removed to support the development, and the pods have been sited within proximity of each other with a minimum clearance of 19 metres. The report contains a site plan of the proposal. There's also the application proposes to the construction of a business identification sign within the road reserve at Coin Hill Road near the corner of Sunrager Highway. The steel sign is to be 1.5 metres high and 1.3 metres wide. The sign is proposed to include the name of the winery, opening hours for the restaurant and cellar door, and directions to the entrance. The sign features a black background with white text, and a copy of it is in the report. Council has received one objection in response to advertising. The key issues raised in the objection can be summarised as increased dust as a result of traffic volumes. The application involves the proposal to use or develop the land for accommodation within 1 kilometre of a wind energy facility. Acciona is the manager of the Walborough wind farm, which is located on land to the south of the subject site. Key issues raised by Acciona include the potential noise or shadow flicker impacts, lack of detail regarding the suitability of accommodation within proximity to the wind facility, in particular noise mitigation measures. A consultation meeting was held and it was resolved that the application has been designed and cited with the knowledge of the location of the wind turbines. The applicant is aware of the visibility of the wind turbines from the proposed accommodation and shown in perspective drawings. The eco-pods are oriented to face north and feature double glazing, including double glazing to south-facing windows on pods 1 to 3 closest to the wind farm to mitigate noise impacts. Flicker impacts are limited due to the position of the wind farm to the south, and all parties consented to the inclusion of permit conditions should a permit be granted. The proposal generally accords with the planning policy framework, and the details of that are in the report. In regards to access, the primary access to the site will continue to be via Coin Hill Road to the north. Coin Hill Road provides direct access to the Sunrager Highway, approximately 770 metres north of the site, and it is a no-through road beyond the subject site. The existing road is narrow and not sealed. In response to the concerns of dust impacts and as a result of increased traffic along Coin Hill Road raised in the objection and a review of the road conditions by council's engineers, permit conditions will be included requiring upgrades to the Coin Hill Road, including bitumen sealing, and there's a change to the length within 50 metres of the Sunrager Highway. These permit conditions act to ensure safe and efficient access is provided to the subject site and potential amenity impacts to the neighbouring properties are minimised. Therefore, it's the officer recommendation to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit for the use and development of a group accommodation and associated works including signage, with conditions. And the conditions are quite rigorous and detailed. And I won't go through each of them, but they do include conditions regarding the layout, landscape planning, the discharge of wastewater, noise control, control of light spill, vehicle access, car park construction, road upgrades, drainage, engineering plans and construction, and conditions from the Country Fire Authority and Water Authority. And there is an addendum to the permits as shown in the agenda that has been distributed to councillors that does have the signage and wind energy facility planning conditions, as well as the road upgrade and signage conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. We have a recommendation. Councillor moved, Councillor Clark, seconded, Councillor Eason. You wish to speak, Councillor Clark?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to remove the amended one that we got later today, in that sense, now, if I can just go through those changes again for the gallery in terms of what that. So the first one is about the business identification sign at the Sunraysia Highway end, in that be dealt with by Council Engineering Department and be appropriately located. The second one is the requirement for the wind energy facility that the occupants are aware that they are in proximity to a renewable energy facility, and that they take all precautions not to kind of enter that space, which again is on private land, so we shouldn't have a trouble. But you know, people do often like to go for a walk when they see something white and shiny on the hill. And the final one is just the road upgrade, which is condition 21, in that the bitumen seal will be extended for the first 50 metres of Point Hill Road rather than the 30 that's in the report. Mr. Mayor, in terms of that, I think there's two kind of things that I want to say about this. This is a significant addition to the tourism accommodation offering within the Shire. In that sense, it's a terrific outcome. They're very modern, funky little buildings. They look really good. If I ever get kind of kicked out of home, I might be able to sneak up around the corner and pop in there for a couple of nights if I need to. But I think also it'll significantly enhance Wayward's business in the sense of things. It's really a lovely little destination within the Shire. It's a great place to go for an event. So if you can actually go for an event and you can stay for the night as well, it'll be a really terrific outcome. So yeah, fully support the application.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Eason, no further comments, councillors? I would just also like to commend the proponents. It's another asset for our great tourism industry, and we're sadly lacking the opportunity of having beds around the area, so it's a real positive for the Pyrenees Shire. I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? It's carried unanimous. Thank you. Item 12.2.3, a 9-lot subdivision at Warburton Street, Beaufort. Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it wasn't on purpose that we saved up a whole heap of planning applications for this evening, so I do apologise that there was quite a few coming to council. The purpose of this report is to consider planning permit application PA 23110 for land at Warburton Street, Beaufort. The application proposed the subdivision of the land into 9 lots. The application was advertised and council received 2 objections. The application has been assessed against the relevant provisions of the Pyrenees planning scheme. The subject site is located on the north side of Warburton Street and the south side of Stewart Street in Beaufort. The site is an irregular shaped lot with the existing lot separated by a channelized watercourse, which is also known as Ding Dong Creek, which runs from the centre of the north frontage to the southwest corner of the site. The total area of the site is approximately 11,700 metres squared. The subject land is vacant with several trees planted near the boundaries. The surrounding area is entirely occupied by residential development. The residential density is of medium-low density, where lot sizes are typically between 600 to 1,000 square metres. The site is located approximately 600 metres to the southwest of the Beaufort Township Centre, and plans of its proximity to the Township Centre are included in the report. There's also the report contains a proposed plan of subdivision. The applicant proposes the subdivision into 9 lots, as shown in the plans there. And those lots vary in size from 759 metre lots to 2,400 metre lots. The following concerns have been raised between the two submissions, and the submissions suggested that the land or a portion of it should have a public component. There was concerns associated with flood risk around Ding Dong Creek, and there was concerns around loss of native vegetation. A letter in response to the objection was provided by the applicant, and the letter addressed the concerns raised by the objectors. The objectors have not withdrawn as a result of the letter, and no further response was received from the objectors. It is the strategic direction of clause 02.03-1 of the settlement of the municipal planning strategy to encourage a density of housing types in Beaufort. It is therefore considered that the site is suitable for subdivision and future residential development. It is considered that a 9-lot subdivision within the township boundary represents an appropriate intensification of the land. The subdivision is considered to provide an appropriate degree of residential infill subdivision in a vacant site within the growing township of Beaufort, and as such, the strategic justification of the proposal is considered appropriate. Pursuant to clause 53.01, a contribution to the council for the purposes of public space is required as part of any subdivision. Pursuant to clause S18(1)(a) and S18(1)(b), the applicant can contribute either 5% of the land to council or pay 5% of the land value to council to satisfy this clause. The applicant has elected to contribute 5% of the monetary value of the site to council to satisfy the clause. The site is partially affected by a floodway and land subject to inundation overlay that bisect the site. The proposal is considered to appropriately mitigate any flooding and inundation risks associated with the subdivision and future development. And this is being done through the way the site has been proposed to be subdivided and includes building envelopes that are outside of the land subject to inundation. Therefore, it's the officer recommendation that council issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit for the subdivision of land into 9 lots, subject to conditions. And again, the conditions are quite extensive and include that the layout not be altered, that there's a public space, open space contribution, that there's tree provision, that there is appropriate vehicle access. There is appropriate works that help with drainage. There's detailed construction plans, stormwater detention, stormwater treatment, legal points of discharge, drainage easements, environmental management plans, easements and reticulated services and conditions put on by the regulatory authorities.
Thank you, Mr. Kearns. We have a recommendation, councillors. Move Councillor Ferrari, seconded Councillor Clark. You wish to speak to Councillor Ferrari?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This development is essentially, as mentioned, an infill program to use existing space within the town for development, which is really, really good and something we've been trying to work with and make happen for quite some time. The intended block sizes vary in size, but they are of generous proportion with fits in with the surrounding landscapes. And I do think that the development plan is well thought out, and according to all those things, I support the application.
Thank you. Any further comments, Councillor Clark?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I begin by complimenting the owner of this block, who has had it since 1966? It is just the most beautiful little spot. And there's no doubt, if you've arrived in this town in the last 10 years and you've been there, you could absolutely think it was a park. It's mowed within an inch of perfection. It's got beautiful trees all around it. It absolutely looks like a piece of council park in that sense of things, but it's not. It's a piece of private land, but I think absolute compliments to the owner in the way he's kept it. and he now wishes to develop it further. And I think that sets up everybody on this land for that kind of thing. There's no doubt that we're no stranger to flooding in the Beaufort Township, but the flooding in Ding Dong Creek is well recorded, and it's been very much catered for in this plan. And again, we'll talk a little bit later about housing opportunity, and Councillor Ferrari has talked about that. This is only 0.75 or 1% of our housing target, but every little bit helps. So I think great application, very happy to support it.
Yep. Any further comments, councillor? No? I'd just like to endorse the remarks that have already been made, and it's obvious that the owners have been very proud of this block and looked after it extremely well, and as they get older, it's a timely reward for the effort that they've put in. So I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? That is carried unanimously. We move on to item 12.2.4, 39 Park Road, Beaufort, buildings and works associated with the caravan and camping ground alteration to an access to a road in a transport zone 2 and the removal of native veggie. Thank you. Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to consider a planning permit application for buildings and works associated with the caravan and camping ground, alteration to the access road, and the removal of native vegetation. And this is all at the site of the Beaufort Caravan Park. The subject site is located to the south of Beaufort Township, and the site has an irregular shaped site that is predominantly occupied by a reservoir, which is known as Beaufort Lake, and Beaufort Lake Caravan Park, Goldfields Recreation Reserve, and large areas of remnant vegetation. The site is zoned under Public Parks and Recreation Zone, and the site is affected by a bushfire management overlay. The proposal includes building and works to construct 7 unpowered sites, construction of 4 powered sites, 14 cabins, and removal of 12 existing en-suites. This results in a total increase in accommodation sites from 57 to 70. There's also the removal and reconstruction of a new amenities and kitchen block, a removal of camp kitchen and amenities block, construction of 9 car parking spaces with additional general parking area, construction of additional internal roads for on-site traffic management, construction of a new access road and entrance and exit to Skipton Road, and removal of 4 native trees and installation of a new septic tank. It's proposed to construct the above works over 4 stages in a time period of a maximum of 5 years. The application was required to be advertised pursuant to Section 52 of the Planning and Environment Act. However, no objections or submissions were received. But the reason we're bringing it to council is to ensure that transparency of council-owned planning permits and ensure that that transparency is maintained. The proposal generally accords with the planning policy framework, including the municipal planning strategy of the Pyrenees planning scheme. Broadly, this application seeks for the intensification of buildings and works associated with tourism accommodation. It's considered that the site is suitable for the proposed intensification, given the additional sites and cabins cover the same geographical area as the existing site. It is further noted that the retention of the majority protected vegetation is an acceptable outcome given the proposed landscaping, replanting and vegetation offsets. There are bushfire risks and the site is affected by a bushfire management overlay. The proposal is supported by a bushfire management plan and bushfire management statement, which has been referred to the CFA for comment. The CFA responded to the referral request and have no objection to the proposal, subject to the inclusion of relevant conditions. Therefore, it's the officer's recommendation that council issue a planning permit for building and works associated with the caravan and camping ground alteration to an access to a road in a transport zone 2 and the removal of native vegetation at 39 Park Street, Beaufort. And again, there is a number of conditions there that need to be adhered to ensure that all planning permit conditions are met and that referral authority conditions are adhered to additionally.
Thank you, Mr. Gowan. Have a recommendation. Move councillor Ferrari, seconder councillor Easton. Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We actually had a quick look up at the caravan park today, and although I've been up there a few times over the years, it's certainly due for an upgrade. It's very much, when you walk around, have a look, it's very much in the 70s. It's a bit of a trip back into the 70s. So it served us really well, but there's a time for an upgrade, and that time's now, and a freshen up. It's a really popular venue, and it's very well patronised, and quite often, regardless of the time of year, it's booked out. So that really says a lot about the venue and a whole lot of things about the management and about our lovely little town. So an increase in the accommodation, which we talk about quite often, there's a lack of across our municipality, will be welcomed, and the van space and cabin space will be well utilised, which of course brings an economic opportunity to the town as well, because people stay and they spend in the town. They might spend a couple of days, and all the money they put in goes into the town. It also fits in with and complements other development being undertaken at reserve. So I fully support this recommendation and the development.
Thank you, councillor Ferrari. Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As councillor Ferrari said, we went and had a look this afternoon, and it certainly does need an upgrade, and I support it. The one thing that in our discussions I think needs highlighting is the change to speed limits on the possible new access on Skipton Road. I think we need to make sure that we seriously talk to the road management authorities about the safety of a new access way on Skipton Road and how they can help us with that access being approved into possibly a 60k zone.
Thank you, councillor Easton. Any further comments, councillors? No? I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? Carried. We move on to item 12.2.5, adoption of the reviewed 10-year asset plan.
Sorry, my apologies. I'm going to leave to go to work.
Thank you.
That's all right. I can see men at work here too.
Thank you, Mr. Kirsten. Thanks, Mr. Gowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to notify council that a review of the 10-year asset plan has been undertaken in year 3 of its adoption and is presented to council for endorsement. The June 2024 revision of the 10-year asset plan includes minor changes only. The 10-year asset plan has been updated to include revisions to the budget amounts to align with the latest long-term financial plan, minor revisions to the listed projects based on changes to condition assessment, minor revisions in the order of works to reflect program efficiencies, and identification of the impact of the February 24 fire event. And therefore, it's the officer's recommendation that council endorses the revision made to the 10-year asset plan.
Thank you. Move councillor Keogh, second councillor Easton. Councillor Keogh, councillor Easton. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Oh, here we go. I know we're back there. That's all right. That's good. This is a really important document. We don't want to zip it through tonight because it really does have all the stuff that's critical for council and really just remind you of the immense amount of assets that we manage. What I think is most important about the plan is the fact that some of the things we have got have got really, really long lives, but even with 150 bridges, we have to replace one every year. We've got the funds in the plan to do that. In real terms, we're trying to maintain our spending as council across all these assets every year on year, and increase that to keep up with inflation and that kind of thing. But it is dependent on external money. But yeah, very important document for council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillor Clark. I endorse those comments. It's not something that we just need to shove through very quickly. In this day and age where we live, the dollar figure seems to lose its value very rapidly. And it's a credit to our staff for the effort that they've put into this document. I'll put the recommendation. Those carried. Thank you. We'll move to item 12.3 Corporate and Community Services Frontline Services Review. Ms Bramwell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report provides the findings and recommendations from the review conducted on the Frontline Services Business Unit in 2023. The Frontline Services Business Unit is a department which provides a very wide range of services to our community, including libraries, customer service, business transactions, tourism services and visitor information, plus hosting a range of events and functions that support the education and wellbeing of our communities. It is, however, an essential yet expensive service to deliver. And previous reviews in 2015 and 2019 resulted in reductions to opening hours and an amalgamation of two formerly separate departments to create the current business unit. For various reasons, in late 2023, it was determined that a further review was needed, including a revisit to previous reviews to determine whether outstanding recommendations remained topical. And outstanding recommendations remained outstanding because we've had a few disasters and COVID in between, which really disrupted the delivery of some of the recommendations. So a final report on the review was delivered in April this year. 15 recommendations for improvement were included within the report, including the key recommendation on a proposed remodelling of the service delivery within the resource centres, which is, the proposal is for a new model to be developed in collaboration with staff and community on what we call an open libraries concept, which means that the staffed hours may reduce or may stay the same, but the actual opening hours of the libraries and the facilities within the libraries can be extended to outside of those staffed hours. For instance, at present, the staffed hours are between 10 and 5 on a weekday, and it may be that we open outside of those hours from between maybe 7 and 10. That hasn't been determined yet, but people who have access during those hours would be, they would be restricted and only have access through electronic means, and they would have to undergo a registration and induction process first. So the layout of the libraries and things like that to accommodate that proposal, there's quite a lot of work still included to design that. And then once fully designed, it would be proposed to introduce that concept on a trial basis for maybe 12 months to identify any issues before finalising it permanently. Early estimates do indicate if we do reduce hours, dependent on the model that we eventually come up with, it could achieve some savings in our budget. Alongside that key recommendation, there's another 14 recommendations that are designed to either support or work alongside recommendation 1, or to increase the efficiency of the service delivery, including the actual customer service and monitoring of our responsiveness, etc. A copy of the report was provided to councillors under separate cover. With regards to the actual model, we're seeking councillor endorsement or approval in principle tonight. We don't have a final model to give you to approve definitely, because that still needs to be developed and there's quite a lot of work in that. Recommendation 8 of the within the list, which is included in the report, requires officers to finalise the review of the customer service charter and the development of a new customer service policy. And I'm pleased that we've actually completed that work. And the customer service charter is an externally focused document that states the focus of the charter and gives a commitment from us to our communities on what we intend to deliver. It will be supported by a public list of service level commitments that will be measured and reported against. And the customer service policy is a new internally focused document that articulates the commitment of customer service to all customers, that is external and internal, increasing responsiveness and acknowledging that all departments have customers. And that is also ready for council approval tonight, or council consideration and approval tonight. So in conclusion, the Service Review Council's Frontline Service Business Unit and Operations conducted in 2023 and finalised in 2024 is now complete, and a final report was delivered in April 2024, including 15 recommendations for improvement. The key recommendation included the proposal to investigate an open library concept of operation for the resource centres. And Council is now requested to approve this concept in principle and endorse further investigation into the development of a workable model for future consideration and approval. So it's the officer recommendation that Council now receives the final report from the Service Review of the Business Unit and Operations, approves in principle recommendation 1 within the report that Council officers, in consultation with staff and community, investigate and design an operating model for the resource centres that incorporates the open library concept as described within the report, and resolves to approve the implementation of the recommendations that are listed in the rest of the recommendation, which I will read out if you like, but to save time, maybe take them as read, included within the report.
Thank you, Ms. Bramwell. Heard the recommendation. Move Councillor Easton, second Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is welcome. It's taken a while to get here, and there's been quite a good deal of work behind the scenes to make it happen. Importantly, this area of our council is the face of council in a lot of cases, and they are a very important part of how we face our customers throughout the Shire. I welcome the report, and the work on the libraries from the point of view of opening longer, possibly without staff, would be welcome in some areas of the Shire. And I hope that the staff that are involved in this understand the importance of the role they play for us in representing our Shire.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Probably got a couple of questions, actually, Ms. Bramwell. In relation to the open libraries concept, are we aware if this has been trialled or implemented in a rural setting likened to Beaufort or Avoca? And the second one is, what level of consultation and communication has or is being undertaken to the community and staff regarding the open libraries concept?
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. The open libraries concept is a European model that's being gradually introduced into Australia. It has been introduced into city libraries and is being considered by rural libraries. I do believe from a rural concept that it is, I can't remember the names, but I think it might be somewhere in the Loddon area, and I think Kingston was also one. And there is some in New South Wales and in South Australia that are also introducing it. There are 5 or 6 libraries, I believe, that are at a similar stage to us, where they are considering the implementation or the development of a model that may work. And we're in contact with Libraries Victoria, Public Libraries Victoria, and we're intending to work together to develop these models so that we can sort of maximise the chances of it working. The level of consultation so far has really been internally. We have done extensive consultation with all of the staff involved, and they are all well aware of the need to be involved and to come along on the journey to actually design this model. They know the community who use the facilities, and they know the community members who need for us to give the access to the national libraries, whether it's staffed or not. So they're the best ones to design the model. I would just like to say as well, you haven't asked this question, but I'll add it on, that the model is intended to increase the service delivery to our customers or to our community without actually increasing the cost. which is always good. And we anticipate that it will be it will open the facilities to a new demographic of the community, people who currently are working, can't get to the library, who may want to use the library for study with their children, or have children that need to be in a quiet time rather than a busy time when there's lots of people there. So we are anticipating that it will widen our market and offerings to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bramwell.
Thank you, councillor. No further comments? I just reiterate a comment I made earlier, and it just seems that we're all the time trying to do more with less. We're getting less and less money available to provide more and more services. And it's a sad day, but that's the way we are moving into this modern world. If there is no further comments, I'll put the motion. Those in favour, it's carried. Thank you. Item 12.3.2, the election period policy for 2024. Thank you, Ms Bramwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report seeks the council's adoption of a revised election period policy for this year. Section 69 of the Local Government Act requires councils to include an election period policy in its governance rules, and we include that policy as Appendix C. The policy articulates key dates around a local government general election and provides guidance to council officers to ensure avoidance of any actions or decisions that may be interpreted as influencing voters or binding an incoming council. The next election will be held on 26th of October 2024. The election will be held by a postal vote. Amendments to the Local Government Electoral Regulations 2020 have resulted in key changes to the dates related to this particular general election. And although at the time of writing this report, the royal assent hadn't been received for those draft elections or the bill, it is noted that it did receive royal assent today. So the inclusions of the dates and everything are now firm that's included in the draft policy. Some of the dates that may have changed is people who are eligible to be on the electoral roll must get their enrolments or update their details in the state or council roll by 4 p.m. on the 7th of August. Nominations for new councillors and anyone out there that's intending to stand. Nominations open on the 9th of September 2024. And they close at 12 noon on Tuesday, the 17th of September. The close of lodgement includes candidate statements, photographs and questionnaires. And the election period starts, so that's the old caretaker period in old money. That also starts at 12 noon on Tuesday, the 17th of September. So the election period policy has been updated accordingly and is attached for your consideration and adoption. And the officer's recommendation that it does actually say here, subject to royal assent being received for the change in regulation, which was received today, resolves to adopt the updated election period policy 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Brown. Move councillor Clark, second councillor Ferrari. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, please, Ms Bramwell. Ms Bramwell, I understand that one of the changes that has come in is around our non-resident landowners having to nominate to actually be on the roll to receive a voting pack, etc. I assume council's already got that well in hand in terms of writing to those people.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Yes, that was actually introduced in the Local Government Act 2020, that for this particular election, the second one under that Act, there was a range of non-resident voters that became automatically non-eligible to vote unless they reapplied. It was required for council to send out letters to all of those voters in 3 tranches, the largest one being the first one, and that has been done in accordance with the statutory timeframes. And I would actually like to thank the VEC because they were really good at supporting us and keeping us on time and giving us template letters and everything that enabled us to do that properly. Thank you.
No further questions. I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Item 12.3.3, rates waiver for the Beaufort Historical Society. Yours again, Ms Bramwell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report seeks council consideration and approval of a request to exempt payment of the rates charges for the Beaufort Historical Society regarding Courthouse 9 Livingston Street in Beaufort. Until 2022, the rates on the old courthouse were paid by Working Heritage, previously known as the Mint Inc., who managed all the unused courthouses in Victoria. In 2022, management of the property was transferred to the Historical Society in Beaufort following a change in registration status to operate from that location, which then transferred responsibility for payment of rates to the society. Unfortunately, the Beaufort Historical Society are dependent on membership subscriptions and grants and do not have the funding to pay for this as an ongoing annual commitment. And they haven't paid for the last 2 years. And they have written to council requesting that an exemption be granted against the payment of rates for them. Otherwise, they would have to abandon the building. So the importance of the Shire Historical Society is recognised by the Pyrenees community during the development of the Community Vision 2031 in Priority 1, which stated, by 2031 in the Pyrenees Shire, our history is preserved, acknowledged and recorded. And following that was subsequently included as Priority 1 of the Council Plan 2021-2025 as a strategic goal to support our community groups, including historical societies, preserve and understand our region's history. So this goes some way towards meeting one of council's priorities. So council officers are therefore seeking council's approval to provide an exemption to charge rates for the Beaufort Historical Society on this property, seeking to wipe off the outstanding debt already owing and granting an exemption for the next 3 years, ending 2026-27, after which the situation will be reviewed and brought back to the council for further decision. And it's officers' recommendation that council resolve to waive the outstanding rates debt of $1,833.07 for the years 2022-23 and 2023-24 for the Beaufort Historical Society. Resolved to grant an exemption against issuing rates notice relating to the assessment of the courthouse in 9 Livingston Street, Beaufort, for the Historical Society for the years 2024-25, 2025-26 and 2026-27 inclusive. And require council officer to report back in early 2026, providing a status update on the circumstances around this matter to facilitate a decision on potential rates exemptions after that time. Thank you.
Thank you. You've heard the recommendation. Moves Councillor Ferrari, seconded Councillor Eason. Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As mentioned, the Beaufort Historical Society initially didn't pay rates. It was paid by another entity. And it's my understanding that this entity decided a change was going to occur and there was minimal consultation with the Historical Society. So it was sort of thrust upon them. And just in relation to the Historical Society, all activities undertaken by them on a volunteer basis. They do a massive amount of work. It's monotonous, hard work, and it's all on a volunteer basis. The Historical Society here and probably across the municipality, it's not just in Beaufort, but they have limited opportunities to raise funds. It's done through memberships and grants, and they're spasmodic. So to raise funds in other ways, it's difficult for them. And their work that has a cost to it. They have to buy supplies, paper, they have to pay some things for utilities for the equipment that they use. So that the limited money that they have would be very quickly used up. And of course, we know, and I mentioned it in my column in the media this week, that the Historical Society, not just here in Beaufort, but across the municipality, in fact, across Australia. They just do such important work in recording our history and preserving our documents and items, you know, because we quite often say that. In fact, we had a gentleman come across to Avoca Councillor Cup the other day, and he had a wealth of knowledge, and I just kept saying, please go and see the Historical Society and get that down on paper, because, you know, we could very much lose all that information and that history. So they just do an invaluable work, and they're sort of the quiet achievers. You don't necessarily hear much about them, but they're there all the time doing that really monotonous work that's so important, and I fully support the waiver of the rates as mentioned.
Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Ms Bramwell, is this a one-off for Beaufort, or is this bringing it into line with other historical societies around the Shire?
Thank you, Councillor Easton. This is a one-off at this stage. I have got it on the plan to contact other historical societies to make sure they're not in the same situation, but no others have been brought to my attention. I suspect that it's because they either don't occupy premises like this, or they aren't in the same situation. But we will find out in the future if that's, and I'll bring another report to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bramwell. I recommend to my fellow councillors that they contact the historical societies in their areas and make them aware of this tonight's meeting, and ask them to look to their own devices.
Any further questions, councillors? I'd like to ask, if my memory's failing, as it may well be, but I think it may well have been raised at the Landsborough Community Cuppa that the Historical Society were struggling and they were looking for support as well. And the other question I'd like to ask is the building in Beaufort, who actually owns that building? Do we know that?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's the Working Heritage actually own the building. But it's the registration and management of it is what's changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that Working Heritage is an actual state government entity, or is it a private entity?
I'll have to come back to you on that one. So I'll take that question on notice, because I'm not actually sure if they're Crown owned buildings that are managed by Working Heritage, or they're actually owned by Working Heritage as an entity by itself.
Just
so
interested
I'll take
to
that
know if the state government mightn't have handballed another little expense across to the unsuspecting clients. Sorry.
It's my understanding, for your benefit, Mr Mayor, that it's the old courthouse.
Yeah,
Courthouse building, yeah.
Yeah, I realise that, but who would actually claim ownership to it when it? Yeah. Thank you. I'll put the recommendation, councillors. Those in favour, that is carried. Thank you. Item 12.3.4, the Audit and Risk Committee. Ms Bramwell, you've got the floor again.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report's to provide council with an update of the Audit and Risk Committee held on the 18th of June. The Local Government Act once again requires council to establish an Audit and Risk Committee, and this was re-established in June 2020. And it's also a requirement under the Act for a report to be provided to council at the council meeting following such a meeting. The meeting was chaired for the first time by a new chairman, Mr Rod Poxon, and a brief overview of the issues considered included topical issues communicated by the CEO, the management report from the interim financial audit by council's external auditor, financial reports, governance and performance matters, including risk management, insurance renewals, emergency management, staff turnover, an internal audit report on the recent review of outstanding recommendations, and an update on the internal audit programme was provided, and reports on fraud and corruption framework and a risk management framework. And for things that's of particular interest to this meeting, a report was required by a recent report against council's performance in 2023 by the Victorian Auditor General's Office, that had to insisted that council's valuation processes for assets must be reported to the Audit and Risk Committee. And as a result of that, there were some recommendations from the committee that have been passed on for council's endorsement, which I've included in the recommendations and I'll read out shortly. And a report on, because of had so many external bodies that now put general recommendations for all councils in their reports, including VAGO, IBAC, and the Inspectorate, we've started reporting on external audit recommendations, those that cover all councils, to the Audit and Risk Committee as well. So we've included that in this report. With regards to the outstanding recommendations from internal audits, a determined effort was made this year to clear as many outstanding recommendations as possible. Obviously, some of the circumstances over the last few years, including COVID, we keep blaming COVID, but it was there and it did disrupt us quite a lot. It meant a disruption of resources and a lack of ability to focus on some of these internal audit recommendations. What we did, clear 23 items of the list. I think there was 85 on the list at that time, and they were deemed as complete. And 28 items were requested by management to be removed from the register, subject to approval. And they were for either they were partially completed but hadn't fully been completed, or that we had management in discussion with the internal auditors had determined that they were of minor or low moderate risk rating and were really a misdirection of resources to focus on them as opposed to the more important ones. So we requested that they be removed. That leaves 46 outstanding items, and a copy of the register was provided to council for information. And the committee recommended that council approve the removal of the 28 items listed. What that removal does, in actual fact, is sort of puts us a much cleaner slate to start and really focus now. We can focus on the important things that come through the internal audits. The question was given by a member of the committee as to why do we do internal audits if we're not going to focus on them? But I think we've had plenty of conversations over the last couple of years on the need to really reset our the commitment that we've got, so we can really focus on them in the future, because we do believe that it's important. And even some of the minor ones that are left on the list could have been removed, but we still believe that they're important to complete. The Fraud and Corruption Control Framework Review has been undergo for a fair few months. I'm pleased to say it's complete. The reason it took so long was we were doing an analysis against the Australian standard, and therefore did a comparison between where we are now and where we thought we should be, and therefore developed an action plan for improvement. And that took quite a while. So the review is complete, as I've said, and 2 key draft documents were presented to the Audit and Risk Committee and are now provided to council for their endorsement following the recommendation of the committee, and that's a revised draft fraud and corruption policy and a new draft fraud and corruption control plan, which includes an action plan for improvement over the next couple of years. Various other documents to support that framework are underway. I believe that's it for that. So the officer's recommendation is that council notes the information contained in the report and attachments, resolves to adopt the revised fraud and corruption policy as recommended by the committee, resolves to adopt the new fraud and corruption control plan as recommended by the committee, and as recommended by the Audit and Risk Committee, resolves to accept the findings relating to 28 outstanding former internal audit recommendations be removed from the outstanding recommendations register. And with reference to the report on the assets valuation process as required by the external audit and as recommended by the Audit and Risk Committee, resolves to adopt the periods and threshold limits for council assets as detailed in the recommendation. I won't go through them all. They've been implemented by our Manager of Finance. And that all infrastructure assets, including land under roads, which is an item that was brought up by the external auditor, being carried out in such time period whereby they are taken into account in the 2025-2026 financial year at the latest. The council carries out an indexation of infrastructure assets based on the Bureau of Statistics producer price indexes on June 2024. And for council to carry out an indexation of lands and buildings based on an index value provided by the Valuer General as at June 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bramwell. Moved Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Eaton. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just have one question, Ms Bramwell. That's point 6 of this report details a whole range of asset of life cycle stresses, but a number of these are quite different to what's actually in the asset plan that we've already adopted this evening. I assume these ones are the ones we're given for accounting purposes. Is that why we have them? But they are quite different, a number of them, and some of them quite significantly different from what's actually in our asset plan.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. It may be that it's different because the updated asset plan has only just been approved, but I will have to take that question on notice and find out for you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. And my thought would be what's in the asset plan from the engineers is the one I'd be following.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just noted one there where bridges 128 to 130 years, a little bit over the top, I felt. No further questions, councillors? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? As carried. Thank you. Item 12.3.5, the 24-25 budget. Once again, Ms Bramwell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report presents to Council the 2024-25 proposed budget, revenue and rating strategy, and 10-year financial plan for consideration and adoption. The Local Government Act 2020 requires Council to prepare a budget for the upcoming financial year and 3 subsequent financial years. And in preparation of this, the budget for the next financial year, Council reviewed the 10-year financial plan and revenue and rating strategy. The budget is required to be adopted by the 30th of June each year and is prepared in accordance with the Local Government Act and Planning and Reporting Regulations. And the budget includes consideration of several long-term strategies to assist Council in considering the budget in a proper financial management context. And in addition to the plans we've already mentioned, the Council plan, it includes, in the context, Council plan and the borrowing strategy. So Council had the budget, the financial plan and the revenue and rating plan on public display for a period of 28 days. No submissions were received. The submissions were, if we did receive any submissions, we had a special council meeting scheduled to receive those on the 18th of June, but that was cancelled because of no submissions. The budget was prepared and taken into account the rate cap of 2.75%. However, in the 2024-25 financial year, Council will experience a lesser increase in revenue from rates as a result of the reduction in the property valuations during this financial year, which have been discussed previously. And the increase in the average rate base is estimated to be 1.7% compared to the rate cap of 2.75%. Property revaluations are completed annually, and although the Council's rate increase is set at the rate cap, actual rate increases of individual properties are, of course, impacted by changes in property valuations across the municipality. This means that individual rates can vary from the rate cap set by the government. And all the documents have been prepared considering the latest economic factors to ensure the long-term financial sustainability of Council. The revenue and rating strategy was reviewed to ensure the equitable distribution of rates across the municipality, and the budget has included a capital budget considered sustainable for the next 10 years. Part of the budget proposed that the council borrows $1.3 million, which will be used for the regional works accommodation project and part of strategic land purchases to meet council's priorities in ensuring appropriate housing. The weight management charge has been increased to cover the cost of delivery of the service. However, it will be noted that in the next financial budget, that's after this one, the 2025-26, at least 50% of those costs will be funded from rates due to ministerial guidelines regarding waste costs funding if they do go ahead in the current format, which will increase rates and reduce the waste charge, but the net fund to council and the net cost to residents will remain the same. An adjustment to the revenue and rating plan was undertaken also following receipt of the annual property evaluations. The most significant adjustment this is to the differential between how much in the dollar each individual property type is rated, and the rating differential for rural properties was increased from 67% to 70% of the general rate, having regard to the significant increasing valuation. When placing the draft budget on public display, the rating dollar calculations was done on stage 3 valuations. The valuations were very late this year, and the state 4 valuations were issued by the Valuer General during the actual budget display period. So as is required, the rating the dollar calculations have been reworked based on stage 4, and the recalculations do not result in any increase in revenue received by council, but there is some slight differences in the differentials, which is detailed in the budget. In the report. So the officer's recommendation is that council resolves it has considered all submissions and presentations made to council, acknowledges the contribution of our community in looking at the budget and considering it, and proposes to adopt the 2024-25 budget as attached, adopts the proposed 10-year financial plan, adopts the proposed revenue and rating plan, and adopts the fees and charges, and authorises the Chief Executive Officer to give notice of the decision to adopt such a budget, and discloses that as at the 30th of June 2024, the total amount borrowed by council is 1.432 million, and projects that 1.3 million will be borrowed during the 2024-25 financial year. And if that's okay with you, I won't read the rest of the things because they're 2 pages long, but they're in the report. And if anyone wants to know them, I'm quite happy to give that information out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bramwell. Move, Councillor Eason, seconded. Councillor Clark, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Bramwell, in item 11, there's, I think, item 10 in the category, in the rate category code that hasn't been filled in for the $136,000.
Ah.
Is that able to be corrected, please?
Thank you, Councillor Eason. I will come back to you on what that is, but I think it might be charitable land.
Thank you.
But I'll confirm that.
Thank you. As Councillor Clark mentioned earlier about the 10-year financial plan, the budget is our annual major document that tells us what we can spend, how we can spend it, and where we're allowed to. It's put out there for public to have a look at and come back to us. We haven't had any of those this year, but it's the most important document that we raise annually. And I want to thank the staff for the work that goes into that in in our last 3 months, we've been constantly discussing what we want to spend, how we want to spend it, and we've come up with this document that we're going to accept this evening. Thank you to the staff for all that work.
Thank you.
Thank you to you, Mr Mayor.
Ms. Brown.
That item 10 is in the recommendations, and it is the recreational properties.
Recreation. Thank you.
Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. As I often say on radio when I get a gig, Mr Mayor President, that a good council gets $1 from you every year and spends $1 on you. We're going to do more than that next year because we've got to borrow some money. So actually going to spend more than $1 on you, which is a good thing. But then again, that's part of the investment, I think, in the future for the area in that sense of things. I, like Councillor Easton, would like to acknowledge the significant effort the staff have made this year to balance the budget. It's been a tough job in that sense of things. And we've kept spending in real terms across those important things about looking after our infrastructure in that sense of things. But I think we're all very, very much awaiting the increase in roads recovery money that will start to flow from next year, which will help us out significantly in that sense. Ms. Bramwell, I just have one question. We made reference in the report to the Minister's guidelines on the waste levy, on what we can charge as a waste charge. And I'm not sure whether we've had any further thoughts about what we might do about this. We've actually made a decision to keep our waste charge as it is this year, but we have those guidelines which will make some changes. Whether we have a plan potentially to go back to the Minister and say the guidelines actually aren't helpful in the context we've got some issues to contain, and it might be an issue for a subsequent report.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. The Minister's guidelines on waste charges has been deferred for 12 months to give councils some time to develop this, and we're also hoping that gives the Minister time to maybe reconsider a little, but we're not pinning our hopes on that. With regards to advocacy, advocacy has been undertaken by practically everyone, but predominantly by FinPro, who are taking a really strong stance on this one, and trying to get, again, a change of the guidelines because it is very impactful. Because of the stay in implementation of 12 months, we've kept the waste charges the same for this coming financial year. The following financial year, it will have an impact that if we do have to implement everything, and the guidelines, what they say is that anything that isn't directly attributable to a household cannot be included in the waste charge levy. So it specifies some like town centre waste, litter bins and street cleaning and that kind of thing. It actually specifies those things, but that we also have to take into account the cost of our transfer stations, which we can't directly attribute to a particular household either. So with those charges taken into account, we've done a calculation and we believe that it equates to 12% increase on our rates, the rate over and above the rate cap for 2025-26. And if the Minister doesn't change the guidelines, then we're going to have to seek a request for an additional rate cap, additional charge over the rate cap for that.
Thank you.
Mr Mayor, I'm not sure this is an issue that maybe needs a subsequent report to council or whether the CEO feels like that, but I think we as an individual council should be expressing our situation to the Minister and asking her to act and consider some really specific things. And I think be quite clear that we will be in a position where we'll need to go for a variation if we can't resolve some of those matters. And, you know, the transfer stations is a classic. I think the other one that's a really classic is that the system actually doesn't allow us to actually educate, like charge for the education that we do of our public so that people actually put the right things in the recycling bin, for example. So there's some anomalies there I think we need to pick up. So, Ms. CEO, I don't know whether you could give us some guidance on.
Yeah, I thank Councillor Clark for raising this issue because it's a significant one. If council were to effectively be around about $1.2 million behind in the subsequent financial year because of this waste charge. It's an incredible impost on this community. You have to come up with that money. You know, council will be left in a really challenging sort of position about having to look at changing some of those services. It could be about closing transfer stations or doing things in a different way, but and reducing some other services to be able to fund some of that waste. In terms of the work, of course, there's a lot of work going on in the sector to inform the minister about the concerns. From a council perspective, I have recently met with senior bureaucrats in local government Victoria to specifically talk about the impact on Pyrenees in respect of the waste charge, and provided those details to them. You know, in particular, Mike Gooey is a senior advisor in LGV to the minister, with a view to providing that direct feedback to the minister. The minister is not always accessible to individual councillors that want to meet with her. So, you know, we have made a point of that. Certainly, it's going to be necessary for us to continue on that path. You know, my understanding is that the minister certainly appreciates and understands that rural councils have some differences to urban councils, and that in rural councils, small rural councils, have significant sustainability issues. So I think the minister has some awareness. The fact that the minister was prepared to give a 12-month sort of review period on the matter before it was implemented is an indication that some of that advocacy has been sort of successfully heard. So I think, absolutely, I think a further report to come to council to consider on the waste charge. I think there is a bit of movement in this space, and I would be hopeful that some of the more recent advocacy is heard by the minister, but you know, it is important for the community to be aware that this is a significant challenge for us to have to actually find another $1.2 million, unless with a further rate increase for our ratepayers, which requires a fair amount of explanation to our community. So that there is a really difficult position for council to be in. In terms of the current financial years, as Bramall had sort of pointed out, the waste charge generates revenue to the tune of $2.547 million, which is proposed in the 24-25 financial year, which is an overall increase of 3.41% on the current financial year. So it's in line with inflation, and bear in mind that waste services have increased at a higher rate than what inflation has, and so being able to keep speed with the cost of delivering those waste services has been necessary to increase that waste charge slightly this year. But of course, the big issue is for next year, and I'd be quite happy to support your proposal about bringing a further report to council on the matter.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I would also reiterate that rural councils Victoria are pushing this issue extremely hard, because all small councils are all faced with the same issue. It was worth also noting that we were capped at 2.75, but by the time the revaluations come through, after we'd done our budget, we are now getting an increase of 1.7%, not 2.75. So we got a double whammy there, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
Ms. Bramall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to add something on the additional impact that if we had to go with an increase in rates for 2026-27, that means that that will catch us up for 1 year, but in future years after that, the increase in revenue on that cap is always capped by the rate cap, whereas if we have it on the wage charge, we can do full cost recovery. So that's another potential impact for us as well.
Yep. No further comment, councillors, so I'll put the recommendation. That is carried. Thank you. We move to item 12.3.6, instrument of appointment and authorisation. Ms Bramwell, you've got the chair again.
I have. I've been busy this month. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is to seek Council's adoption of an updated instrument of appointment and authorisation regarding an environmental health officer. Council is required to review its delegations, appointments and authorisations as required. And we do this annually, but we also do it when we have a change of officer or role in the organisation. And some positions within the council administration benefit from having individual instruments approved for their offices, as they may be challenged by members of the public when undertaking their duties. Such positions include the environmental health officers, and we have a new contracted environmental health officer starting with council at the end of this month, Mr. Joe Nanora. And so a new instrument has been forward for council's approval. So the recommendation is that council, in the exercise of the powers conferred by the Local Government Act 2020 and other legislation as referred to in the attached instrument, considers and adopts the following instrument of appointment and authorisation, which is the instrument for the environmental health officer, and resolves that that instrument be sealed.
Thank you. Heard the recommendation, councillor. Moved, councillor Clark, second, councillor Easton. No comments, councillor? I'll put the recommendation. It's carried. Thank you. Recovery update. 12.3.7. Ms Bramwell, you're up again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report just provides an update to the council and community on recovery activities arising from the October-November 2022 flood events and the February 2024 fire event, and relates to activities between October 2022 and May 2024. Recovery continues with a strong focus on supporting community recovery and building resilience. And it is important that recovery is community-led, and our staff are very aware of that. The attached recovery plan summary of review details the status of recovery actions, which with some key outcomes including the existing flood recovery team now looks after the fire recovery and has been rebadged as a disaster recovery team. The recovery newsletter has been updated to include fire recovery and will be distributed quarterly starting this month. A new drop-in centre has opened at the Beaufort Library on Wednesdays to provide a welcoming environment for those looking for information and support. It's not just available on Wednesdays, of course, it's always available, but there's just people there readily in the community available there. And Partners in Wellbeing are also available on that day. There's a few recovery events, resilience events that have been held, which is detailed in the report. And 13 community resilience grants have been awarded for just over 24,000 worth of community-led initiatives. And staff are working with the Bendigo Bank to work through options for fire. Successful advocacy for psychosocial support has been done and is going to be provided by local health providers, Ballarat Community Health and the Grampians Community Health. So that's a great outcome, which previously that kind of support was given more centrally. So this means that local people can get local support, which is a good outcome. And there's a few other notable matters included in the report. It's the officers one thing I would like to say about the risk implications is there is a significant risk to public safety caused by the consecutive, and when I say safety, I mean well-being and mental health safety as well, by the consecutive, concurrent and compounding emergency events in the Pyrenees over the last 12 years, with 3 lots of floods, 2 lots of fires and COVID in the middle. Widespread damage to public and private assets, the environment, and substantial financial and personal hardship caused to individuals, community organisations and businesses. The council faces significant financial risk if the recovery effort is not managed well and requires ongoing support from the Commonwealth and state governments, which is becoming harder and harder to receive. It's the officer's recommendation that council notes the progress made against required recovery actions in the flood recovery plan and the bushfire recovery plan, and continues to advocate for more funding to provide long-term support for individuals, communities and businesses to recover well and build resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bramwell. We've heard the recommendation, councillors. Somebody move, Councillor Eason. Second to Councillor Clark. You wish to speak, Councillor Eason? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We continually get these reports of the flood recovery situation or the fire recovery situation. And as is the usual event here, we're seeing it last far longer than I believe is absolutely necessary. And that's because funding from the Commonwealth and the state governments is getting harder and harder to catch up with. We have to come up with recommendations, we have to come up with facts and figures, and when these facts and figures are passed up the line, no response comes with any sort of alacrity. It generally relates to us having to bang our head on the table for months and months on end, waiting for someone in one other government to come up with an approval process that allows us to start work. It's very, very concerning to me that this process is taking longer and longer with every event that occurs on our fine shire. I don't know that there's a lot we can do except whinge a bit more, but I'll continue to whinge as long as someone will listen.
Any further comments, councillors? I would just like to congratulate our staff members that have kept their nose to the grindstone here, Jane and Noel, yes. I'd like to congratulate them. They've been really dedicated. The community, I'm sure, appreciate the effort and their approach to the community for all what they do. So I'd like to commend
Gillian and
Gillian,
Kim,
and quite a large
and Tony.
group. Yep. Thank them all personally. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. We move to 12.3.8. Ms Bramwell, you're in again. Customer satisfaction survey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is for council to receive the 2024 Community Satisfaction Survey report and to consider the key findings. Each year, the local government Victoria coordinates and auspices a statewide local government community satisfaction survey throughout Victorian local government areas. And although participation remains optional, questions are relevant to mandatory local government performance reporting, thereby making us need to do some kind of thing to get the answers. The telephone survey was conducted in February, March this year, and our results were benchmarked against statewide average and the average for small rural councils similar to our own. The attached report contains detailed survey outcomes with the results shown as scores out of 100, and a summary of performance as perceived by its community is provided below in the report. I won't go through that individually. It will be posted on the website and available for anyone to look who wants to. And if anyone has any questions about any part of it, they may contact me. At the time of writing this report, a thorough assessment has not yet been completed. However, some general observations have been made in the report about the results and factors influencing the results. Some good indications, which we hope to try and continue in future years, is perceptions of overall performance is unchanged from last year. Now, that doesn't seem like a very good report, but we've had a decline over the last 10 years. So for us, that halt in that decline is a good result. our overall result does remain in line with the comparative responses. With regards to the perceptions of performance on service areas evaluated, we've had an increase in scores in 8 of the 16 measures, 50%, remained the same in 4 measures and reduced in 4 measures. So as I said already, we consider this a big win for us this year because we've not got this decline. The big challenge now is to continue that performance in future years. The highest performing areas were waste management, arts centre and libraries, appearance of public areas, emergency and disaster management and recreational facilities, all areas that have either had a real lot of attention given to them over the past 12 months, or with regards to emergency and disaster management, it's been fairly obvious the work that council does to support the community. The lowest performing areas relate to local roads, which may have had impacts from the flood event, and a continuing perception that some roads are managed by us that aren't, which again we have to address. I'll consider the rest of the report as read, and the officer's recommendation is that council publishes the survey report on its website, uses the results of the survey to review council plan performance targets where appropriate, uses the results of the survey to support the council's preparation of a new council plan post the election later this year, uses the results of the survey to review specific areas for continued improvement, and we've already said that through the report and that has started, and uses the results of the survey relating to the local road network as evidence in advocacy on the need for timing and administrative improvements regarding more responsive disaster recovery provision. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms Bramwell. We've heard the recommendation, councillors. Somebody prepared to move? Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Rees. Any comments, councillors? Councillor Clark.
I think just to reinforce Ms Bramwell's comments, I mean, there's been a general decline in all levels of government post-COVID in that sense, and we are part of that. But it is pleasing to see that we've kind of moved back ahead of the average of the councils of which we're compared against. And I think that's a good spot for us to be. But as always, there's room for improvement, and we're always up for it.
Yep, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Rees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just one point I'd like to make. As Ms Bramwell mentioned, we quite often are assessed on the roads that aren't ours. And those roads are generally the major roads that we all use throughout the Shire. And if you're not sure whose roads they are, if there's a yellow sign on the side of the road saying rough road ahead, you can just about accept that it's not ours. It's a Vic Roads road. So if you need some way of identifying them, that's generally the way at the present time.
Thank you. If you happen to hit that edge of the asphalt just out of Warborough, you'll realise that there's rough road ahead. You might take the front left-hand wheel right out of your motor car. No further comments? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That is carried. Guess what, Ms Bramwell? You get a spell. 12.3.9, the project update from our CEO. Thank you, Mr Nolan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And look, I'll take this report as having been read. It is for information of council. Evidence for the community. There's a lot of work going on with a number of projects. The only project I'll just highlight is the fact that we had a disappointing outcome with our grant application for our boat caravan park. We've had a planning application before council tonight for this comprehensive piece of work in upgrading our Beaufort Caravan Park. We've lodged an application with the Growing Regions Fund for $1 million to support some of the stage development there, which was unsuccessful, unfortunately. There's a lot of work and effort gone into trying to seek these funds. Funds are really hard to come by. So in my recommendation, Mr Mayor, I won't speak to any of the other projects which are there to note, and I just ask the council note the project's progress, and also recommend that council officers seek feedback from the Commonwealth about the unsuccessful Growing Regions Fund application and continues to pursue other sources of funding for the unfunded elements of the project.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Heard the recommendation, councillors. Move Councillor Keogh. Seconded, Councillor Easton. No comments. Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This sort of report is very handy if it was in the hands of many residents' homes going around the Shire. It does show where we're spending some of that budget money that I mentioned earlier. How we get that information out there into the hands of people so that they can understand what we do and how we go about it is something that we've discussed today, even as we speak. So we are working on getting that information out into the community in more fashions, and hopefully we're able to do a better job of that in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. No further comments. I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? That is carried. We move to 12.4.1, the biodiversity impacts of renewable energy projects. Thank you, Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to bring to council and the community's attention this piece of work that's commenced by the Victorian government, which shines a light on some additional work that's needed to be undertaken in respect of biodiversity mapping, where it relates to the impacts of renewable energy projects. And of course, why it's relevant for this community is that apart from having a number of renewable energy infrastructure projects within our Shire, there are a number of other proposals that are at different stages of development. One of those is the Brewster Wind Farm, which has been reported to this forum previously, and it's raised a number of concerns through the community in respect of biodiversity impacts, and particularly in respect of piranhas. So it's important for this piece of work to be undertaken to avoid situations where councils left to have to advocate for community because matters relating to biodiversity haven't been given proper consideration. So so that's what this is about, Mr. Mayor, and I recommend that council acknowledges the approach of the Victorian government outlined in the document, a better approach to managing biodiversity impacts of renewable energy projects, and 2, provides input, if appropriate, into the development of the tools and guidance material to be developed at a future point in time, which is outlined in the report.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Move Councillor Ferrari, seconded Councillor Clark. No comments? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. We move to 12.4.2, Victory Draft Renewable Energy Community Benefits Plan.
So, Mr. Mayor, this report is to bring to the attention of the community this initiative by Victory, state government agency entity, to essentially put a discussion paper out there about draft renewable energy zone community benefits plan. So, councillors, we all understand that communities like within the Pyrenees Shire and many other rural communities in our region have host to renewable energy generators in the form of wind farms primarily. What comes with that is the need for transmission, and it results in a lot of hard infrastructure in our landscape. And of course, this impacts on our rural communities, and we've had lots of conversations about this. The benefits associated with this renewable energy, of course, are not all achieved at a local level. Most of the beneficiaries are in urban dwellers and high energy consumers. So part of what this, the objective of this plan is to see some of those benefits returned to those communities that are impacted by having to host this, infrastructure. Now, the plan puts a proposal there, and it's seeking some comments. So a submission has been made today, councillors, because the submission's closed today, and I'm seeking councillors' endorsement for a submission, and essentially with some of the elements of the plan and my comments sort of provided in respect of whether those the plan is actually sufficient. I mean, there are some elements that can be improved, but by and large, it's a positive development on behalf of VicGrid to try to return some of those benefits back to the communities which are impacted by these developments. And Mr. Mayor, so the officer's recommendation is that the submission by the CEO be endorsed.
Move Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Keogh. All those in favour? Oh, Councillor Clark, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I was just going to add a little bit more. Mr. Nolan's covered it really well, but I think we've got to really realise that about two years ago, we didn't even have a VicGrid in operation. So the fact that we've got a VicGrid is a really, really important step. And as Mr. Nolan says, we're building this infrastructure. At the moment, we've got about 8 megawatts of renewable energy in Victoria. According to the state's plans, we need 60 megawatts by 2050. So that's a 6-fold increase. So if we think we've seen it to date, we've got a long way to go in that sense. But of course, every time you build it, you're not building it where the existing power lines are in most cases. So the infrastructure's got to go with it. And I think the key thing that we've got to get the message through to government and to the broader community is that pretty much everything we're building in this space at the moment, we're putting the power line in, we're putting the renewable in, and we're sending it all straight to Melbourne. And it ain't stopping here. So if we don't get our benefit out of it, we're going to be the ones that are going to suffer. And much as we appreciate that the renewable industries pay rates, they pay what's a figure in lieu of rates, it is about 20% of what you and I all pay.
Yep.
So we're getting a bit done over. You put on top of that the community funds, it's about 30% of what you and I pay. So I don't think it's going to be 100, but even if it could get to 50, it'll make a really significant difference to rural councils right across this state in that sense of things. And that's really what this is about, making sure that we get the benefit out of this, what's going to be the most significant change in the look of our landscape since, well, basically since we cleared it in the late 1800s.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Keogh.
Sorry, I think it was Councillor seconded.
No, I definitely saw you move your finger, Councillor Keogh.
Happy to. Just so that we're doing the best of it.
Any further comments, councillors? I'll put the motion. That is carried. We move to 12.4.3, the Victorian Government housing targets for councils. Thank you, Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And of course, this has received a fair amount of publicity over the last sort of week or so, where the government has announced these housing targets. And for Pyrenees, the target is 1,200 additional homes by 2051. And that's around about 45 new homes per year on average over that period, which is not much different to the current projections for Pyrenees. And what's contained within the reports are the targets for the region to give some understanding of the level of growth within the region. And some of the other councils have got more stretch targets there, particularly in the city of Ballarat. The context for this is the Victorian Government's housing statement that was produced last year, which foreshadowed targets to be set and determined, but which sets projections for the whole of the state. Housing is, of course, an important issue for this council, and I think it was in November 22 that council endorsed a housing strategy, which provided council's response to the demand for housing that exists in our communities. And as part of that strategy, council has subsequently looked to secure land to facilitate, further development. And what's been reported previously to other council meetings is council's initiatives in that space. So, Mr. Mayor, I guess the recommendation that's contained within the report here then is that council notes, and I realise there's a spelling mistake in that first recommendation, that council notes the housing targets announced by the Victorian Government for councils. Council gives further consideration to its strategic planning program in light of the new housing targets. And of course, strategic planning is necessary to ensure appropriate zoning of land to enable that housing to be developed in the forward projections. 3, that council continues to progress its planning for the development of council-owned land in Beaufort and Avoca. And 4, that council continues to see opportunities to partner with Victorian Government and others in the delivery of new homes in the Pyrenees Shire.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Move Councillor Eason. Seconded, Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's wonderful that the state government has decided to put these targets on every council. And in this particular instance, if we're looking at somewhere in the vicinity of 45 houses per year, we're looking at probably $1.8 million to prepare a block of land for those 45 houses. So people, when they're asking, what are we spending our money on? Why aren't we doing the roads? Why aren't we doing this and why aren't we doing that? This is another element of something that's been passed off from the state government without any funds attached. And we have to find the money out of our rates or loans or whatever to create these properties for people to buy. Again, something that the government thinks is a great idea but won't fund.
Thank you, Councillor Eason. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I think we're at an interesting stage, and these targets are out for consultation in that sense, and that the state's going to finalise at the end of the year. My first thought, though, is I think actually we can do a bit better than that in Pyrenees. Like, if we're already doing 45, surely we can do 60. Probably we can do 75 if we were serious about it in that sense of things. And I don't think it's a bad thing that we would think about that. And interestingly, Mr Gowans and I were at a conference on Thursday where we had a demographer talking to us about it, and there was a question asked about this, and he said, you know, I know the numbers look huge on a statewide basis, but they are simply population growth and migration. There's no extra added in there. That's simply what we think things are going to grow at if we just keep going the way we are. So it's certainly going to happen. I think the question for us as councillors is whether we can perhaps take a bigger share of that thing. And I would expect Mr Noel at some stage in the next 2 or 3 months, there'll be a subsequent report to council around these matters. Is that what you're envisaging in terms of just progressing these from here?
Yeah, well, Councillor Clark, I think, you know, this space is actually developing at a quicker rate than, you know, we'd like. I think it was November 22 that Council endorsed the strategy, our strategic approach to housing, and there's been so much that's happened since then. So, and I'll recall back in, it's probably about 4 or 5 years ago, where we had a partnership arrangement with our neighbouring councils at Northern Grampians, Ararat, where we referred to the OBAN project, and there was a housing demand study undertaken then, and some work done to identify the opportunities for housing to be developed. And of course, all of those targets that were developed then have now changed because there's been so many activities since. But there's some of that work that could capture some useful information to assist us in moving forward. And I think, as we've you know, discussed among councillors, that understanding where the opportunities for growth in our townships are, it's important to understand those. And I guess, you know, and just to maybe pick up a point of Councillor Eason's, that the actual delivery of housing in the community is not left to councils alone. It's, you know, it can only happen with private sector investment and government support. Part of council's role is to ensure that there's adequate zoning and appropriately provided land for that development to occur. So I think there's certainly a lot more thinking to be done. If council was to actually take a further stretch target around housing, We have an economic development strategy which projects a population growth of 10,000 people into the future. I can't remember the date, but it might be something like 2035 or thereabouts. But you know, and that would require a stretch target from a housing and worker accommodation perspective. What might assist in generating some interest in development is an application that council have before the state government for worker accommodation under the Worker Accommodation Fund, which seeks funds to not only do the first stage of development of the land that council has purchased in Burke Street, but to actually see the construction of 10 homes on that site. So if we're successful with that, that'll be a priority for us in the short term. If we're unsuccessful with that grant, then there's a bit of rethinking to do in terms of how we progress with that development. But I'd be more than happy to actually bring further report back to council on the matter.
Thank you. No further comments, councillors? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, that is carried. This brings us to item 13, councillor reports and general business. I'll start tonight with councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a lot to speak about tonight, but the usual things, the CUPPers and the councillor briefings. Excuse me. Had some meetings with some constituents across the time, just a range of different matters discussed. A meeting with the Beaufort Football Netball Club, and it was pleasing to see a couple of weeks ago that Beaufort, the seniors, got a win on the board. So I think it's the first win for a couple of years. So that was really good, and it was really timely, and it was well celebrated, and rightly so. Had some queries regarding the ongoing fire recovery activities, and the general consensus, the feedback I'm sort of getting is everyone's fairly happy with it. They understand the complexities around it, and it's such a big job and ongoing role. So generally speaking, I think people are pretty happy about that. And also had the Audit and Risk Committee meeting, which was outlined. A lot of the stuff we discussed was outlined earlier by Ms Bramwell. So that's about it for me, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Ferrari. Councillor Keir.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, quite quiet. The biggest thing I think that if people have been following the Carnham Uniting Church's story recently, it's now become its own entity, so its own little parish sort of community there, and it'll govern itself rather than being part of the cluster. So for them, that's a move to be able to sustain that building there and those grounds for community use. Again, we did, as was alluded to, we had a great catch up at Stone Lee in the past month. It was a great opportunity to catch up with a great number of locals. Big issues there. We've still got quite a big telecommunication black spot sort of issue that we're trying to work on and looking at solutions for the members of the community there. But also there was a few road safety issues, tree issues and that, but looking forward to still working with those locals and council to come up with those solutions. As we all know, the weather conditions on the roads are very different going into winter, and they change with the weather. So please always drive to the conditions and continue to remember that to report any of the hazards on our roads anyway, not the yellow signed roads or whatever that council is in the leadership. But again, our customer action report system, or you can ring through to our customer service desk. So they're wonderful there to be able to help you with that. So keep well, everyone, and keep warm. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Keir. Councillor Beeson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It must be getting cold. There's not a lot going on, so not a lot to report. But had a couple of meetings about the Sunraysia Highway, so I know a little bit about Vic Road's situation, and it's not improving dramatically, unfortunately. Also had some meetings with constituents. The Chinese Garden is looking to see where they can take that organisation going forward. And one of the things that will possibly permeate throughout the Shire, the local RSL sub-branch in Avoca is finding it very difficult to financially stay afloat when things like insurance for the building is costing them over $4,500 a year. And that's the sort of thing that other community entities will find as their buildings come up for renewal. Their insurance costs are going up, other costs are going up, and in some instances, they will find themselves having to divest themselves, much like the RSL is currently discussing. And we're hoping for community support, but it's an ongoing thing. It's not something that we can have a quick rip round and solve in a month or two. It's an ongoing thing and will be an ongoing thing for other community organisations.
Thank you, Councillor Reason. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Like all the other councillors, the council activities in terms of briefings and meetings over the last month or so. And I look forward to welcoming everybody at Warborough, I think, for our next cuppa in July, which will be good. Central Victorian Greenhouse Alliance, so I represent council on. We've had a board meeting recently, and again, a lot of the discussion has been around renewables, power lines, and those kind of things that affect most of the member councils in that area. I've attended an ALGA board meeting, of course, and we've just made a submission into the federal government inquiry into local government financial sustainability, and made presentations to that committee, which is really important because, again, the bulk of our money that comes externally comes to us from the federal government. MAV, of course, is working at the moment on a submission again to the state inquiry, which is, while it's a little bit about money, it's much more about responsibilities that the state imposes upon us or makes us do in the sense of things and how that, you know, works for us or not as local government. I attended the drop-in session for the election flood study, and that was really, really good. There was a number of people just kind of coming in one and two at a time, talking about their experiences, helping validate the mapping, those kind of things. And I'd just make a shout out to Judy Martin. Judy came in not only with photos of the 2022 flood, but also the 2016 flood and the 2011 flood, which was really invaluable for them. It gave them a little disc and away they went, and I'm going through and going, what is it? Oh, it's really good. So really appreciate that, Judy, in the sense of helping get those models correct in terms of where the flood and those kind of things is. And just last week had a meeting at the hub at Warborough, which is one of our regular 3 monthly meetings. And I think our AGM is now scheduled for the 16th of August. Thanks, Mr.
Thank you,
Mayor.
Councillor Clark. Like all councillors, I was at Stoneleigh. I had the opportunity to join the Amphitheatre Rural Fire Brigade a few Sundays ago, and where they had over 20 recognition awards. There's only two that I want to make special recognition to, and that would be John Lusby and Ron Reid, who achieved 65 years representing their local brigade. That's pretty special, I thought. There were, as I said, a lot of good, honest volunteers at that day, and it was great to see them rewarded because they are purely volunteers. They get a pretty raw deal from the government in that regard, and old fellas like me who like the Lusbys and the Reids, we get to a certain stage of life where you're not allowed on the fire truck anymore. I don't know whether you've got to go and pick up a beater and try and put the fire out at your back door, but they lose sense of reality, some of these people that operate in Spring Street, I'm sure. We had a GBAC meeting in Ballarat, which I attended, and the situation with regards to small rural councils and their funding was discussed at great length there. I won't name a neighbouring council who are in extreme financial difficulty, and through no fault of their own, they've just got to a point where they're growing faster than what they can accommodate, and they just can't keep up with the costs, and something's got to be done. And amalgamation's not going to take the problem away, I can assure you. But some of these large metro councils are getting a fair share of the financial assistance grants that just adds to the multi-million dollars that they've already got in the bank. They've got more money than they know what to do with, a lot of them. Sadly, Tanya mentioned the Uniting Church in Snake Valley. Well, sadly, at Landsborough last Sunday, the Uniting Church held their last service. no longer going to operate out of their little church in the main street of Landsborough, which is, I guess, a sign of the times that we're living in. But it just does dishearten me a little to see these sort of things happening when your congregations fall away. The population's not falling away, but people that go along to church nowadays are just not following the traditions that we used to. And for the observing public tonight, it is with great pleasure that I asked the CEO if he would come to his feet while I congratulate him on his reappointment for the next 5 years. And with that, I will declare the meeting closed. We don't have any special meeting minutes tonight, so thank you all for your attendance in the gallery, and all those viewers wish you a good night, and make sure you stoke the fire. Thank you.
Mr. Noel, I think you need a.
I could do. Sorry.